Welcome back. My name is Gabi Motuba, and this is the Listening Threshold. This is season 2 of my Sonic Conversations podcast that is still available on Spotify for you guys to listen. Season 1 was about analysis of my album, The Sabbath. Season 2 is going to be a bit different. So season 2 is called The Listening Threshold. And this is basically all the information that I've gathered so far around sound, informed by other artists, informed by research, study, informed by, of course, my own experience as well in creating music. And this podcast is really just to share what I've learned so far and all the kind of nuggets of wisdom that I have to share to any vocal students or music students out there who are interested in just broadening their understanding of sound and music, and who want to be, a better musician, and also who want to kind of acquire a different perspective when it comes to sound, when it comes to, music and the creative process. Okay, so let's just get right into it. This is the Listening Threshold. This episode is called Surrender. The most common question that I get regarding music and sound is, how does not standing in your own way look like? Because I'm always preaching about this idea of musicians and vocalists in particular, don't stand in your own way. What I mean when I say that, what I mean by that is your sound is really a culmination of how you came to sound. And how you came to sound is your sonic lived experience. So whatever your environment was at the time of your upbringing, all those sounds that you were exposed to as a young person, how loud your mother spoke to you, or how soft your grandmother whispered to you, or how far in proximity the sounds of taxis were, or what was happening in your immediate environment. All those auditory experiences are building your auditory kind of system at the same time as you're receiving or perceiving all these sounds. So meaning this also just says that your sound is very specific. Our sound is like a fingerprint. I'm going to read a paper that we got also as first year student, which speaks about the idea of every person's voice being like a specific fingerprint. So I want you to keep this in the back of your mind when I'm explaining this to you. So your auditory system relies a lot on your perceived sound. How you perceive sound builds the capacity of your auditory system, but also you are made in the image of your perceived sound, of your auditory system. So the sounds that you were exposed to becomes your system. So when I say don't stand in your own way, it means to really recognize where each frequency lives in your own auditory imagination. So an A, for instance, or a C, for instance, sounds a particular way on the piano, but it also sounds a very specific way in your own, through your own auditory system, through your hearing, how you hear an A and how it sounds really comfortable within you and within your body is very unique to you. And this also informs whenever I do vocal exercises with vocalists. My number one rule is it shouldn't hurt. This is also an indication that you're finding sound that is kind of in alignment to your auditory system. So when it hurts, You know, when you're doing a vocal exercise and there's a particular screech or it doesn't feel good on your throat, or something in you is like very uncomfortable, that is telling that it is not to say that you can't sing that note, but you're singing it from the wrong place, right? The placement of that note is not correct within your own auditory system. It can be correct for someone else, but for you, how you're experiencing it, it's not sitting in the correct place. So whenever you're doing vocal exercises, it should never hurt. That is an indication. And when it does hurt, it's an indication that, oh, perhaps in my through my body, this sound is placed in a different place. You know, it's either placed in your head voice or in your chest voice, or it's placed differently, nasally. You know, this is why we explore different singing techniques in order to really find the many places where sound lives within our body, within our bodies. So this is very important to keep in mind. So like I said, your voice is your fingerprint. It's like a fingerprint. It's really, really unique. And it's very important for you to understand that what you have perceived is your sound. That is your style. Whatever genre you decide to embark on, that is completely up to you. But your style and your sound lives within your perception, lives within your auditory system. Okay, I hope I've answered that correctly. Question number 2 I have is, what does it mean when someone says, I was born to be a singer? This one is really good. I was born to be a singer. I was born to sing. What do people really mean when they say this? Through my experience, like I said, okay, let me go back a little bit into this idea of perception, auditory, and the auditory system. So when a person says, you know, I was born to be a singer, it is an indication of someone's deep desire to sing or to produce the sounds that they have perceived. So perception is happening in the ear, through the ear. It's something that I hear, but it's not yet something that I have produced. But for me to hear it, any note is an indication that there is a possibility of reproducing that sound. So the minute I can hear or perceive a sound, I'm 1 foot in the door to being able to produce it. So when someone says, you know, I was born to sing, it means they have a desire to recreate the things that they perceive, the sounds that they perceive, the sounds that they hear, you know, and this is an ongoing practice for someone. And they do it daily. They don't even realize that they're doing it, you know, sometimes. And to recreate a sound is not just recreating a song, you know, but this is part and parcel. You know, when we hear a really beautiful song that has made an impression on us and we try to sing it, this is part of that exercise. Or you hear your favorite artist and you try to sound like them, this is also part of that exercise. But all you are doing is just, like I said, finding where the sound lives within your auditory system, within your body, and as an active practice, being able to connect the relationship between your ear and your voice. That's actually all you're doing. It's not to say that you're singing like someone. It means that what you're hearing, you're finding in different places in your body, and you're actually doing vocal exercises. I mean, that is basically a very integrated form of vocal exercises. That's why also in jazz, we really love this idea of transcription. Or when you're in a jazz program, they're always, you know, hammering this idea of transcribe. Listen to Charlie Parker, listen to Ella Fitzgerald, listen to Nina Simone, listen to Sarah Vaughan. It's not to say that you're going to end up sounding like them, but it's really just to marry this relationship that you have with your auditory system, to be able to understand where sound is placed best for you. You know, where sound is beautiful, where that moment of technique and beauty really becomes embodied through you. These are the exercises that you can do in order to find that. So yeah, that is question number 2. Is there anything else that I wanted to speak to regarding? So it's really a matter of desire, you know, and it also debunks this idea that there's this innate kind of relationship to certain skills, you know. Really, what separates, I think, singers to doctors to nurses to astronauts is merely a matter of interest, a matter of desire. And that desire is perhaps, you know, something that is divinely given, but that charge, that energy to be able to pursue something, you know, to be able to kind of inquire and pursue and find the solution of this task, you know. Because if you think about it in terms of singers, many singers, when they're young, they struggle with reaching certain notes, right? But that's the fun exercise, you know. I used to do this also in my own practice. When I'm listening to a singer that I really deeply admire, and she reaches notes that I just find so unimaginable, or there are techniques that, you know, that I hear within her voice and her range or colors that I find so beautiful, so that I have perceived. And my job then, after that, that moment of inspiration, it is to pursue. So that's the job of the artist. It's to pursue, to follow that sound, and to bring out that sound within oneself. This is actually, this is the work of an artist, you know, to perceive what is happening on the outside, and to be able to find it within the body and to reproduce it, to represent it. I think this is also what, you know, Nina Simone was speaking about when she says the artist's job is to mirror the world in which they inhabit. So I'm of the understanding that this is kind of what she meant. It is not to say it is to reproduce a genre or reproduce, you know, reproduce a fully fledged thing. You know, it is actually to just be in conversation with the sounds that are happening around you, you know, and to be able to access those sounds, you know, access the sounds of wailing, access the sounds of crying, access the sounds of joy, access the sounds of, you know, very unique experiences unique to you as an individual. Like I said, you know, because you are made in the image of a very specific environment. And if you're able to reproduce that environment within your sonic vocabulary, that really creates a beautiful and unique voice, you know, because your voice is that of a place, is that of a people, is that of a language, is that of an experience. And I think that is really profound, and we'll get into it in other episodes, but you know, this is very useful. Like I said in the opening of in the pilot, when I said that, you know, we trying to understand sound in order to figure out how to build new worlds. So this is, sound is also sonic information. You know, auditory systems are sonic information. This is also telling of who you are. It's also telling of your people. It's telling of your environment, of your experience. Your sound carries all that information. And if we're able to kind of speak to the design of your auditory system, we're also, of course, able to alter it, not for yourself, but for future generations. We're also able to improve it. We're also really able to destroy it, or we're able to make something anew, you know, depending on if you thought that was you know, that auditory system is something that you'd want to carry, is something that you'd want the next generation to inherit. So this is all really information, you know, at the end of the day. And yeah, so that is what it means when someone says, I was born to be a singer. It means they have that energy, that charge, that desire to reproduce the sounds of their environment. And the last question is, what does it mean when we say someone has found their sound? So when we notice singers, I think, who have a profoundly unique expression, and it's very clear and it's very powerful, you know, what is it that we mean? Shout out to Denise. She's a friend of mine. We were on a fellowship program called Oscillations, and we were in Europe presenting some of our works. And I was doing an exhibition, a sonic exhibition called The Scream. I think it's still available on YouTube for you guys to check out. I did a few interviews with that. But I presented a paper. And a few months later, after the fellowship program had ended, she reaches out to me and said, Gabi, you have to read this. You know, I was reading it and it echoes so much of what it is that you were proposing. I wondered, do you know who these people are? So she sends it to me, immediately asked, please just send it to me now. You know, and I'm so glad that she did that. It was quite special that I came to this article by way of a friend who kind of really heard what it is that I was saying when I presented the paper, and really took it upon herself to reach out and, you know, share this paper with me. So this one is called, the book is called Refiguring American Music, right? But I'm reading from the first chapter called Empire Sounds, Audible Empire. And I am reading from the introduction, Hearing Empire, Imperial Listening. It was by Ronald Radano and Tejumolo Olanyan. So this is the proposition that they've put forth. It says, we seek to call attention to the discernible qualities of the herd, that which one hears and listens to, that condition imperial structurations and that reveal themselves as part and parcel of the regimes of knowledge, understanding, and subjectivity, key to the constitution of both belonging and unevenness in the making of the modern. We seek in turn to flip it the other way around, to inquire into ways in which imperial structures help to modify and produce qualities of hearing and to make a music discernible in the first place. In this, we seek to recognize multiple qualities and characteristics of the audible, and to do so dialectically and relationally. What we want to situate at the center of this volume are the many activities of humanly organized, performed sound that generate and reflect the ordering project of European thought and its conception of music. I'm going to leave it there. Clocked. So this article is really, really interesting in what it's proposing. So like I said, it's supporting the idea that we are made in the image of our surrounding. And this article, the main argument that it's putting forth is that colonization also happened in a sonic fashion. The idea of empire, it was also kind of rolled out in an auditory with the hearing and with sound in mind. All right, it was not just this tangible thing, but it also happened sonically, and the implications of that is is that the idea of perhaps the 440 tuning system, the church bells, technology, the introduction of different equipments that emanated a sound or created a sound, had an implication of the reordering social structure of that particular, ecological experience or ecological environment, which is very interesting. So it's saying that whatever was there before kind of became null and void because of this, this introduction, this sonic introduction of these external sonic instruments, right? That, like I said, reordered society, but also that reordered how people came to sound. This is very, very important because it's trying to propose that whatever sound that we are producing, it is not to say that we are fetching it from outside of us. This sound already lives in us, and we grow in this sound, and you actually cannot produce anything other than what you have experienced. And what it's also saying is that everything that you can produce, you have perceived, right? So the idea of the sonic empire becomes very important, is that especially when we are trying to think about colonization and its implications, when we're trying to think about what is folk music, when you're trying to think about genre, when you're trying to think about purity in sound, this already kind of puts a spanner in the wheel, because it's trying to say that you cannot produce anything outside of the thing that you have experienced, even if you try, which is quite interesting, because it's trying to say that your sound is already there, and in order to influence a sound, you cannot influence it at the latter end of the stick. You have to influence it at the beginning. So this is now where the idea of sound design comes in, because empire was also part of that. It was largely a sonic design that inspired a particular sound. It inspired a particular people, it inspired a particular perception. It reinforced particular, taste, a particular taste that we can't run away from, on a superficial level. Even if you're, like I said, even if you're engaging in I guess, folk music or indigenous music. It's trying to say that it is your style, that idea of style does not live on the superficial plane of genre, you know. It lives within your auditory system. It lives within how you came to sound. And what is also interesting is that usually I think the artists who are really, really powerful are able to represent how they came to sound in a very unapologetic manner. In a manner in which they don't pick and choose what they have perceived, you know. They, and I mean, this is just my opinion, but I think a really profound artist or a profound sound is one that allows us to see who it is that we are without any kind of buffer, without any kind of filter, and of course presented to us in a beautiful way, in the sense that this artist is aligned with that truth within their bodies. You know, like I said, that perception meets desire creates beauty. You know, they are not in tension with what it is they perceive. So it is not necessarily that they have a judgment toward what it is that they have perceived, or and to say that is to say that they do not have a judgment with their experience, their auditory experience, but they're able to communicate it in such a way that they are able to produce it within their own bodies. And what the consequence of that is beauty, you know. And it just, that is, I think, the real, or my definition of beauty. It is not something, you know, that happens after the fact, but it is really the, you know, the combining of these two experiences, sound and desire, you know, and of course the work that an artist does in order to represent a sound and honor a sound that they have perceived. And with that, I think I will end off today's episode of The Listening Threshold, and this episode was called Surrender. So I hope the great takeaway of this episode is, you know, is more curiosity when it comes to sound. I hope that we're able to kind of think about sound in a very exciting way. This is very exciting for me. It's one of my passions. Of course, I've been a musician for almost 20 years, a professional. I've been practicing professionally for 20 years, but I've been listening actively for a very long time. I think since the age of 6 or 7, you know, getting into that practice of recreating one's environment. So this is just to encourage all upcoming musicians and vocalists, you know, to keep practicing that muscle of, I mean, taking what's happening on the outside and trying to find it on the inside. And this is a great practice, if there's any, of to really find your way into being a great artist, a great musician. And until next time, it was lovely. Let us bend the world to the sounds of our own voices. See you guys soon. Thank you for tuning in. Peace.